Good evening, and welcome, Harry. Good evening, and welcome to the Geeks of the Round discussion for Chapter 5 of Netflix's House of Cards. Joining me tonight is my lovely wife, Allyson, my brother, Harrison, and our good friends, Lynn Ith and Vita. Emily was here a second ago. I'm going to re-invite her and see if we can get her back in. Even though my lower third isn't working tonight, I am Jon Eric, and I am hosting for the evening. Now, we're talking about Episode 5, that is, informally, the one with the fundraiser. So, as usual, I have some discussion questions set up here. Okay, Emily's telling us to go on without her. That's a shame. She always has such great insight. So I'm going to start where this episode starts, with Frank and Zoe. Let's open up to the table first and foremost. General impressions. What do you think about this relationship having just, for the first time in the series, taken a sexual turn?
Well, I just went back and watched the beginning, the first 20 minutes of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of funny. They were kind of playing with each other, and there was this one moment where Frank was halfway, oh gosh, he was amused by Zoe and when she was looking at her phone and talking about how she actually had her own hashtag on Twitter called Go Zoe, and he was amused by her, and she was amused by herself, and they were basking in this one moment of power, or how she conceived power, I suppose. And then he just plopped that phone in the water, and she said, "I'll get you too."
A major exertion of power over her.
Yeah, exactly.
Total lack of control, especially for someone her age. I think out of the people in this hangout, Harrison and I are the closest to her age. And Harry, how would you feel if somebody just took your phone out of your hands and dropped it into a glass of water?
I'd tell him to get the fuck out of my bed.
Oh, dude, I'm not even close to her age, and I would stab him in the hand.
Yeah.
You do not take my phone away from me.
So that's a giant act of power right there. And
yeah, but
I wonder,
phones on TV really seem to hold the value that phones in reality tend to have.
Yeah, and I do wonder. I do wonder if that was conscious on his part, the timing of doing that, just as she's talking about how famous she's gotten. What do you guys think?
Yeah. No, I agree totally. I think that was perfect. It's also like, yeah, social media, yeah.
Hey, Twitter twat, yeah. That kind of thing.
This is a guy who owns a PS3 for playing video games. I get the feeling that he's pretty in touch with modern age and modern technology.
That's a good point. I forgot about that, and we're going to get reminded again, like, next episode, I think. But, oh man, we're losing him. Did Harry just drop?
Yeah, Harry just dropped.
Oh, shoot. Wait. No, there he is. Weird. Anyway, so there's that, and then there's also the fact that his leverage over her, the way she demonstrated that he can trust her, was by basically giving him the leverage in the form of letting him take a nude photo of her on his phone. So he's got the dirt on his phone, and he destroys her phone.
Right. So, yeah. So he had his moment of non-reality there, because then we get to see him at home, and I'm not sure his wife is I think his wife is like, yeah, you think you know everything about me? Yeah, sure. And it's such a contrast to Zoe. It was kind of hilarious.
Well, let's jump right into that. That's probably the biggest topic of discussion for the whole episode, which is that short conversation they have when Frank comes home in the morning, in which we really kind of get the explicit understanding for the first time that they know they cheat on each other, they're okay with it. I don't know of any other relationship that works quite that way on TV. I don't know what to call the arrangement, but they seem to view sex as like a bargaining chip, and they understand the way that each other can use it, right?
I think it's almost assumed that they're going to cheat on each other. Like, I'm pretty sure Claire expected Francis to sleep with Zoe all along at one point or another.
Was it jealousy or just shrewd negotiating when she said, it sounds like you're getting more out of it than she is? Or, I'm sorry, it sounds like she's getting more out of it than you are.
I think it was shrewd negotiation. I think that's... I don't know, that harkened really back to Chapter 1 for me, when Claire was being very, very uptight and controlling about, you didn't see this coming, how could you trust these people? Mm-hmm. So I think that, to me, read as that side of her coming back out.
Interesting. I'd forgotten about that part of it.
Well, also...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He really needs Zoe. Like, he'll never say it to her, because that's part of his power play. But, I mean, he never would have gotten the old Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State ousted, nor would he have gotten the other woman in. He now owes him a favor in a way.
He won't say that he needs Zoe. He won't say that he needs Zoe, but he does say that she's been very useful so far, and that's true. Zoe has been instrumental in helping Frank achieve what he's trying to achieve. So with that in mind...
Nebulously getting his revenge.
Yeah. Harry, do you have mic settings? Can you... you're coming in pretty faint.
Oh, I think my hand was over the mic. Hold on, is that
better?
better?
This is better.
Ah! On-air tech support, yes. Okay. So, I don't know, I got this weird subtext when Claire said, it sounds like she's getting more out of it than you are, like she didn't want him to keep sleeping with her, but she's going to accept that he will anyway. I don't know if that was my reading of it, or if there's something actually there.
I think if there's any sort of jealousy at all, it's a sense of still leftover bitter resentment from him sort of manipulating her into not taking that money from Remy.
That's a good point, yeah. Which, there's a callback to that as well. At one point in the episode, he actually says, and I quote, "We made the decision to turn Remy down. No one forced you." At which point, I think most people stood up and yelled at their screens, "That's bullshit, you idiot." At least I did. But yeah, I mean, Frank it's built right into his character that he is an unapologetic, shameless manipulator. It's what we're witnessing throughout this whole show, and it's also being introduced as a point of tension in their marriage for the sake of the drama of this show. And do you think this is something that they go through periodically, where she just gets sick of his conniving?
Probably. I would.
Yeah. Or is this the first time in their marriage that she's really felt this hemmed in?
I don't know. How many other times has she had to make professional sacrifices for him?
Yeah, I think I agree with Allison's point. They're very goal oriented, and they've got specific plans of how they're going to achieve power in Washington. We know where they're headed. They want to get into the White House, and I feel like because of his position that she's had to step back a number of times on a number of issues, and we're just seeing the current part of it But I think as the series goes along, of course, things, spoilers, there's other sacrifices that she's made.
Yeah.
So she's getting tired, and I don't know what it is specifically about this specific moment. I mean, it is a lot of money that was turned down from Sandcorp, but I think there's more there. That was just the tip of the iceberg. That's just the latest thing in a line of things that's getting on her nerves.
My impression from some of the dialogue that we got this episode was that the level of intrusion from Frank's politics into her job was sort of unprecedented in their marriage. She actually says to him, "This can't keep happening. We can't keep letting your job get in the way of mine," which struck me as a this is new territory for them kind of thing to say.
Yeah.
So
Call me crazy, but I kind of get the feeling that both of them are meant to feed off of each other. That her being the head of a charity and him being a very, very powerful could be a symbiotic relationship for the both.
Oh, absolutely, and at no point in the entire series is it more evident than in this episode, especially the second half of this episode, where they plan and execute this perfect fundraiser where she throws this charity event. All of his friends show up from Congress. They donate $750,000 to her charity, and they all look good. And on top of that, it's a coup for Frank's bill because he gets to make Marty look like a dumbass. So, Harry, I think you just said something and I didn't hear it. Never mind.
I was saying that, I thought the whole point of their relationship was that they were supposed to make each other look better. That her being the head of a charity and him being a very powerful congressman was sort of a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, very much, and that happens just without a hitch.
Provides her with money.
Yeah, definitely. So, speaking of the financial side of things, they have this fundraiser. They raise $750,000. That's the number that Claire gives them at the end of the night. And something clicked in my head the second time I watched this, and that was Sandcorp. Remy told them that Sandcorp was doubling their donation to $1.5 million before she turned him down. And she's pressuring Frank to match that $1.5 million. But they raised $750,000, which was Sandcorp's original commitment before they pulled out in the first place. Is anybody else getting the sense that there's this escalating need at the Clean Water Initiative, that Claire kind of has a case of more going on?
I'm not sure. I missed that detail. I forgot that it was that the amount had changed, so I'm not sure. But the way you describe it, yes.
Yeah, it's a piece of perspective that's pretty valuable.
Stupid cell phone.
Oh, that's fine, Harry. Do I need to bring... No, you're on stage. Okay. So, so they raised at this fundraiser the amount that Sandcorp was going to give before they pulled their pledge at the start of the season.
Yep.
But that's not enough anymore. She's still complaining that they have this shortfall of $750,000 because Sandcorp was going to double the pledge. And that's a different lens through which to view her ongoing plot as the series continues. Shifting gears a little bit, but also still on that fundraiser, this is the most in any one episode so far that we've gotten to see of Marty, the union head.
Yeah.
Now that we've gotten a fair amount of screen time from him, what do we think of him as an obstacle for Frank?
Marty's a Marty's a raging river and Frank's a dam.
Yeah.
That's about what to know.
Yeah, I was kind of.
About...
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marty.
Wow. What an insult.
Ouch.
I keyed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember if it was this episode or another one specifically, but Frank makes reference to Marty's temper always getting the better of him, and if there's one thing we know about Frank Underwood is that he knows how to keep his emotions under control, if nothing else.
Yeah, that was actually near the very beginning of this episode. He does the direct address to the camera where he says that Marty's temper gets the better of him, and that Frank actually seems a bit concerned. He says, "I may have pushed him a little too hard," which isn't necessarily concern for his friend, but more like I may have made things more difficult for myself by pushing by pushing Marty too hard. And sure enough, Marty becomes an enemy for the rest of the time. I don't know. I didn't.
Well, I mean,
go ahead, Harry.
Marty. I was saying, well, I mean, Marty did spend probably the better part of a month trying to hammer through that education bill, arguing with every other union head, and being Frank's, what's the word I'm looking for? Guy who talks for you.
Advocate?
While Frank was down in with his constituents.
Oh yeah, being his proxy.
Huh? Proxy, thank you. Yeah, but I mean, he spent a better part of a month being Frank's proxy, and he basically figured out that Frank is, going to stab him in the back. If he's not giving any leeway for where Marty wants to meet him halfway.
Yep, that's true. He also, this didn't bug me the first time through, but the second time it really occurred to me.
I think
Marty strikes me on the second viewing as really tone deaf here. Especially as the episode climaxes, where the attendees of the fundraiser walk across the street with plates of food for the protesters, and Marty is at the picket line yelling, "Don't take the food!"
Yeah.
What did he think was going to happen?
especially considering he couldn't get his own damn pro.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seemed like a barb especially
Protesters.
designed to make him look like an idiot. The fact that it wasn't even... So, and a reporter called him on that. Are these even old teachers here?
Yeah.
The first viewing, as soon as he said he wanted protesters there, I looked at Allyson. She can attest to this. I looked at her and said, so he's going to look like he's protesting clean water in Africa?
Yeah.
A few things work out really well for Frank here, and from a writer's standpoint, it's worth thinking about. When the event can no longer be held inside the hotel, when they have to move to the courtyard outside the hotel, the timbre of the event changes significantly too. I don't know what kind of food they were planning on catering before, but he changes to hamburgers, hot dogs, and soul food, and the barbecue. They nix a string quartet for a DJ, and the event that wound up happening is obviously very, very different from the one that had initially been planned, in a way that turned out to dovetail really nicely with the protest that was going on across the street, because the people looked a lot better bringing plates of soul food over the line than they would have if it had been whatever it was they would have been eating if the event had been held indoors, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was way more grassroots looking, and I don't. It was just very well played. It was very well done the way it turned out. It's kind of a lucky break.
Yeah.
in what it did. I don't think they intended to make Marty look like an idiot. He was doing that by himself. But they made it. They even underscored it by bringing, the plates of food over. So I was happy that somebody quickly set up and said, "Yeah, I'm hungry." Thank you.
Of course.
So yeah, that was pretty awesome. There was more going on there, I think, with between Claire and this is the one where her friend shows up again, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. He makes a surprise guest appearance at the fundraiser.
Right. So that was interesting. I was kind of interested to see where that would go in that episode, but we don't get to find out later on. But that was very interesting. So, and Claire actually seemed more calm in the middle of that event. I mean, that's definitely her wheelhouse, and she was just very powerful through that whole thing. I think this is the episode where I saw her power even more than that very first episode. I think it was the first one where she was firing everyone.
Yeah, first two.
Yeah. So that, I mean, and she had somebody else do it, and it was like, yeah. But this is the one where I really got to see more of her inner, what was really going on. So I thought that was also very interesting, and I'm glad that they waited till another episode to show it.
Yeah. So we talked about a lucky break, and it does seem that that Frank has gotten quite a few lucky breaks here. Oh, there was a quote, and I'm not going to find it. I'm at the article here, but Todd Vanderwerf, writing for AV Club, had a review in which he summarizes the whole season, and he complains that Underwood never really faces any obstacle that he can't resolve by, at the very latest, the first 15 minutes of the next episode.
True.
And so far, he does seem pretty much invincible at this point. Do we still feel like this is set up, building up to a bigger payoff, or is there no tension?
I feel like I've been talking all the time, so somebody else talk.
Our numbers are diminishing, so you can talk as much as you want. We've lost 2 people to technical difficulties now.
That's a shame. I think that the power, I don't think anything is diminishing. Wait, can you ask the question again, the tail end of the question? I think I'm answering the wrong question.
Yeah, I mean, is the tension for you as a viewer diminishing because of Underwood's ability to resolve any problem that gets thrown his way?
No.
Okay.
He's just going to get more problems.
That's true.
I mean, he thinks he's on top of it, and part of the joy I'm having is watching him be unraveled a little. Watching him be unraveled a little bit more by each thing, and then he thinks he's wrapped it up. He's solved it, and then the next. But there's always this little thing that's still not totally put away, and then he gets unraveled again. But I'm sounding like I'm spoiling everything, so
That's
I'm
okay.
done.
All right. So we that question really just kind of dovetails into something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, which is the structural nature of the show. This is the kind of stuff that gets me on. It gets me really interested. For a long time, TV was really strictly episodic, where for every set of characters, there'd be a problem introduced in the beginning of the episode, and it would get resolved by the end, and that was it. And in the last decade or so, it's become very much in fashion to accentuate that with plots that actually continue throughout the course of the season. And in a lot of cases, a lot of really good shows are basically just ongoing narratives that don't even really have this episodic structure anymore. House of Cards is doing that middle ground where there is an ongoing story, but it does seem like we're getting the traditional problem is introduced, problem is solved by the end of the episode thing that we've always, that has been fueling TV since the 60s. Now, is that troublesome in light of the way that Netflix has released the show and in light of the way they're marketing it, like saying this is the new era of television, we don't need to be restricted by weekly viewing schedules anymore? Does it undercut that message to have a structure where a problem is expected to be resolved by the end of a 1-hour chunk?
I don't think so. I totally binge watch episodic TV shows. Just because there's no continual arc doesn't mean I don't view them that way.
All right. Yeah, and that's another thing we can talk about is, what are the viewing habits? Allyson and I watched about 3 at a time, I think.
Yeah.
But
Okay, I was going to say that, and I was trying to figure out a way to make this answer as short as possible, but I mean, so I think that that before, and I want to say it was the late 80s, that most episodic TV programs were daytime soaps, I mean, non-episodic. Non-episodic.
Yeah.
Right, and there were mini-series and there were minor story arcs, like maybe 2 or 3 episodes, but there wasn't much. So in the late 80s, there was yeah, exactly. So there was a great show called Wise Guy in the late 80s, which was the first show that had this continuing arc, even though it had episodes within episode, episodic themes, but it had continuous things that went on and on because this was an undercover cop, and he would go on the next job and infiltrate something, and that was the continuous theme, and there would be different things that happened in each episode, problems he may solve, may not solve, etc., etc. And that was the first show that was so popular in that storytelling style, and it was fairly new at the time, that it just grew in the 90s, but it took a while, though. So the way that this was introduced all at once, I think was a good idea, because Vita was saying in the chat room that there wasn't much tension about the first half of the show, of the episodes, and to me it's like, yeah, but I kind of expected them to start building, and that we're supposed to be just waiting for a shoe to drop. That's how some of this is. I mean, yeah, everything was too easy at first. Yep. And yeah, we're seeing more of the struggle on Claire's side now, but
all right, yeah.
So
that's a good point. And yeah, Vita was agreeing with me in the chat room. She said she's 6 episodes in right now, so she's only 1 hour ahead of where we are in this hangout. And she wrote in that she felt bothered by the fact that Frank does seem pretty politically invincible at this point. Without going into too much, I will say it's not going to stay that way for the whole series. And basically, I just wanted to bring that up and how it plays with the dynamic of the episodic structure. Now we're a little over halfway through this hangout at this point, and we haven't even mentioned half the characters on the show.
Yeah.
Let's move on a little bit here. Here we have the scene that is basically the end of Tom Hammerschmidt from the Washington Herald, where he has to go in and defend his decision to fire Zoe, and then he gets the axe. What did we think of that scene? He gets this monologue in which he basically sets out his reasoning in about as eloquent a voice as we can expect from him for why he had to fire Zoe, even if it was the wrong thing for the magazine or for the paper. Well, do you agree with his reasoning?
I honestly, as much as I love the episode, I'm actually now seeing it a second time, wondering sort of what the point was of that scene anyway. I don't know. I always just sort of assumed he would get fired because he went against orders. He called her a cunt. She tweeted that.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why the firing had to happen on screen, and I'm not really sure what it really lended to the episode as a whole.
I think it was sort of necessary for us to see the aftermath, and I think the only reason it was as long as it was so that we could get this monologue from Hammerschmidt where he gets to actually explain why he made what to the audience is a patently wrong decision. Maybe I should wait for Lynn to come back. Because this monologue, without that monologue, we don't really have... Without that monologue, Hammerschmidt stays a one-dimensional character. And maybe you're okay with him just being the villain of that particular scene, of that setting of the show. But this is the only chance Hammerschmidt has gotten so far, and probably ever will get, to really lay out his point of view for his boss, but also for us. For us to hear what he has to say about why he did what he did. Lynn, did you think he sounded reasonable in that monologue?
Wow. Yeah, I got to listen to that too again tonight. He's one of the diehards. He hates social media. Mm-hmm. So if this is supposed to be, let me see, there's a Washington Post and there's a Washington Times, right? There really isn't a Washington Herald.
I don't even think there's a Washington Times. My read on the show is that the Herald was a stand-in for the Washington Post.
Yeah, right. Okay, because even the logo.
Very similar.
The first time we see it, it's like the movie, the Woodward and Bernstein movie, All the President's Men.
Yeah.
Right. So it's exactly like that. It's supposed to be the Post, and the older lady who's the owner is supposed to be like the owner in the. It's really similar to Woodward and Bernstein. So it was kind of hilarious at first. At any rate, she is more in touch with what's going on than we think that she is. I mean, he thinks Hammerschmidt thinks that she's out of touch, and she's not. And she recognizes Zoe's, I don't know if talent's the right word.
Charisma, presence.
Yes.
What she brings to the table.
Yes.
That's a great term. And so, and I think that Hammerschmidt is, I mean, I understand his commitment to the word and journalism and no social media, but, you know, you got to move with the times, and people are used to getting instant news. I don't know. It was a losing battle. It's like, I get his point. I understand why she left, and, you know, the current climate of media is what ended up winning.
Yeah.
You know, if Twitter was just a passing thing, she would have said, yeah, let's offer Zoe more money to come back or something. Or let's give her autonomy and offer her something to come back. And yeah, that just wasn't going to happen. Not with him.
Yeah. It's true.
So,
and I mean, this is a satirical standby of the last decade or so. Is the character is like, oh, the internet, that's just a fad. To see a character who really thinks like that on this show, to me is a little off-putting, just because everything else is so, at the very least, aspires to realism. And this is one character note that I just have a really hard time coping with. But at the same time, I do feel like his speech, when he has to justify the decision, was sort of a redeeming moment. It was their last chance to really humanize Hammerschmidt. I think they did a pretty good job. You know, given the setup that they couldn't get rid of.
I agree.
Any other last words for Tom Hammerschmidt before we move on?
No, I hope that we get to see him again someday. That's all I'm going to say.
We might. I'm not sure. So let's talk about the character that I've repeatedly said, I think Emily has also repeatedly said, is the most interesting character of the show. Let's talk about Peter Russo.
Oh, poor Peter.
I know. I know. Now, Russo has, once again, for like the 4th episode running, he's got the most emotionally effective arc in this episode, where he is staring at his computer, where thousands of his constituents are telling him that he's a terrible person, and he cannot find the words to argue with them. The scene where he's reading his email, and he starts typing the message back to one of his constituents, trying to explain, and he realizes he can't finish that sentence because even he doesn't know the answer. Tell me I'm not the only one who feels for the guy, right?
Oh, I feel terrible. I mean, like, what can he even say? There's nothing, absolutely nothing that can be said there.
No, I was getting real worried about him. He was just letting people beat on him, and it was kind of brutal. It was emotionally brutal.
Absolutely. Especially because at the time when he most needs someone to basically catch him, someone to support him, he needs an emotional support structure, is the exact moment his girlfriend leaves him.
Right.
She quits being his chief of staff and quits him. At the same time, she's very cold in the one scene she's in this episode, which makes him feel more alone. He feels trapped. Now, as an audience, do we feel like there's a way out of this situation that he hasn't seen yet? Is there anything else he could be doing right now?
Hugging his kids, I don't know.
Yeah? Okay. I didn't have anything for that either. I was going to put it to the group. So he does what perhaps a younger version of himself would have thought of first, which is get some liquid courage in him and goes to find the person that he thinks is responsible for all this, give him a piece of his mind and probably a piece of his knuckles too, which is Frank Underwood. Now, Underwood finds him on his doorstep, drunk, and well, we've seen Underwood as a brinksman already. We've seen him play that game. In Chapter 3, he threatened to tender his own resignation as a bargaining chip. Now, in this episode, he does the same thing, but takes it to a much darker place. He practically goads Russo into committing suicide. Does that change our read of Frank? Does that, does that escalate what we realize he's capable of?
Somebody else who hasn't seen all the episodes answer.
But I've seen all the episodes.
Well, let me ask another question then. Does it matter to Frank in that moment whether Peter lives or dies? is he doing this because he knows Peter isn't going to kill himself, or is he doing it because he legitimately doesn't care?
I think he would have to care, because I think if Peter Russo were found having committed suicide in Frank Underwood's bathtub, that would be problematic for Frank. Charity. I think Frank has to care.
Yeah. That was not the moment. I mean, we're supposed to believe that, this is what I got of it. We're supposed to believe that Frank is trying to make Peter believe that there's still a chance if he would just clean up and straighten up and fly right. And he's too attached to Peter Russo at this point to just give up and say, well, yeah, go kill yourself. I mean, that would have been way too easy. He has to. Actually, that's a really good point. I never thought about why he didn't just, kick him to the curb right there.
Yep.
At that moment, there was just too much invested. I mean, if he could pull off, I think that there's still a lot of the selfishness of Frank there, because if he can pull off pulling Peter Russo out of the gutter, out of an emotional gutter, then number one, he'd have another loyal minion for the rest of his political career, possibly, and then number two, if Russo came back around and got the jobs back for his hometown, then he might also credit Frank for part of that too, and that would again be another feather in Frank's cap. So, I mean, this is all politics. Again, it's all for Frank's gain, and if he has to put a little bit of elbow grease into it, then so be it. If he has to nurse somebody back, Frank is playing Thunderdome. He's in it for everything. He wants to win. He doesn't care. He's going to help you if you want to be helped, but if you don't, then screw it.
Yeah. And remember how I mentioned it was just as Russo needs this support structure the most that his girlfriend leaves him.
Yeah.
Frank is telling him point blank to his face, nobody else wanted to stick up for you. I'm the only person who will stick up for you right now. And he's technically correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, that was also a lie. He says that he stood up for Peter at that DNC meeting. He says, they wanted to dismiss you out of hand, but I said, no, let's keep Peter Russo on the table. That's a lie. We saw that scene. He kept his mouth shut. What do we make of that? Maybe nothing. I know we're going to get sort of an answer to that question next episode, but
yeah,
I don't know.
We'll just leave that one. Table that discussion.
Frank is definitely a chess master here, and he's thinking several steps ahead of where I would have been thinking.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say. It's not going to become apparent quite what his gambit is until almost the very end. So, we have hit all of my talking points. Did anybody else have anything that occurred to them while watching this episode? Is there anything in particular you guys wanted to talk about that I haven't mentioned yet?
Gosh. Peter's kids again.
Yeah.
We saw Stamper, but it wasn't.
Stamper had that great scene. Oh yeah, you want to get the commissioner on the line? Here he is.
Stamper is just, wow. He's a trip.
Yeah.
The actor's really good. He has another role on The Good Wife, and he's a trip. A recurring role.
Oh, that's awesome.
No, gosh, I was thinking, Christina. I wanted to get more into Christina, but since she left, there's not a lot to say this time.
Yeah.
So.
I can hardly blame her, but.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's never. I mean, I thought that she was going to be a rug, but she's not she's not that easily. She finally had to say no.
The problem with Christina, I think, is that she either isn't equipped to deal with the emotional needs of an addict, or she just doesn't realize that that's what she signed up for. And, I mean, that's fair, right? I mean, if you know somebody's baggage getting into it, and then you bail on them when they need you, then you're kind of a bad person. But if you don't, if they spring it on you, I mean, she's going to do what's best for her.
I don't know if there's anything wrong with, if you're involved with an addict and realizing the addict is dragging you down too, getting out. I don't think there's a reason to judge her for that.
I
don't think it's unreasonable to have her resign from being his chief of staff after she's broken up with him.
She seems, at this point in the series, to have no knowledge of his... That's wrong. Hang on. It seemed to me like she didn't really know he had a problem until he went on that bender after not giving testimony. So if that was like a surprise to her, if that was like, oh, this guy I just fell in love with is also an alcoholic and a drug addict, never mind.
I never got that sense. Oh, I don't. Maybe I'm just making an assumption, but I figured all along that she was vaguely aware of his problem, but her attempting to be in denial as to how bad it was, and probably part of her job required her to. I mean, I don't think she would have made a good chief of staff and been completely in the dark about his problem.
Okay, that's a good point.
Right, and I was never sure about how much she really knew about. I mean, was this the first alcoholic binge that he'd gone on? Or alcohol and coke, I guess, at one point.
Well, he has that binge in the first episode where he gets pulled over that sets all this in motion.
Right.
Then in the second episode, he tosses out the bag.
Right.
This sort of unconscious, which is sort of this private commitment to go clean again. But he doesn't tell anybody about it, which makes it really easy for him to backslide when he gives no testimony. And that was the first time, I think, in the series that he screwed up in a way that Christina had to address it.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if this was, the nth time in a series of stuff that we hadn't seen before the starting point of the series. I kept looking for a conversation about, I've slid off the wagon before, or
we don't
my family or something. I've done this before, but it doesn't sound like this has ever happened.
What I thought it was when he attempts to get on the wagon this series is the first time he ever even vaguely attempts to get on the wagon.
I don't know if they ever say that outright, but I think that's true. That was what I got from context.
And I think what pushed her over the edge last episode really was the kid factor that time.
That's true. Yeah, he left his kids out in the lurch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're close to 50 minutes here, so we're running a little bit over. Was there anything else anybody wanted to talk about?
Nope.
I guess not. All right, well, we lost some people on the way, but we made it through. Another great hangout. For Allyson Whipple, for Lynn Ith, and for Vita Tres, I am Jon Eric with Geeks of the Round, wishing everybody a good night. And we'll see you next week.